For those of you who've seen my other videos, you know I try pretty hard to take a more neutral stance on controversial topics, including the prominence of the looking for raid difficulty, flight, and the recent spat on RNG. I take some pride in that. The World of Warcraft is a big enough game that there are opposing opinions on nearly every part of its gameplay. It's enough that I bring up hot topics, but while I make my opinion known, I try to not push that opinion on others, or insist that the opposing view is wrong. This isn't one of those videos. Hey, it's Sol with news, opinions, and analyses, and today I'm gonna go over 5 things in Legion that I think turned out to be an absolute disappointment. They hurt the game in ways big and small, but they hurt WoW regardless. Funny enough, this is a short list. There aren't a lot of things I could identify in Legion that could be outright reviled. For example, the most angry players who don't like legendaries probably don't have any. And as an FYI, yes, I finally got one. Big whoop. I tried to think of things that probably no player would like, so here's my best attempt at it so far. I'm certain that there are some of you who disagree with me, and as always I respect that, even though you're wrong. The easiness of this fight relative to Mythic Cenarius is the problem of only 20 or so people, the team on Russian Guild Exorcist, who was the first to down the boss. However, his early death reverberated across the gaming world as a big misstep from Blizzard, who later admitted fault. What this did though was damage perceptions and expectations among the raiders of WoW, leading them to question if this first tier of raiding was considered too undertuned in its entirety. Never mind the fact that this is the first raid in the first tier that's expected to span into early 2017. And never mind the idea that this concept of quote-unquote tiers of content might be eroding away altogether. But it rattled players and furthered the arguments against active legendaries in the Mythic race, RNG, split raiding, and any other argument that could use the Xavia's kill against Blizzard. If the fight was tuned to last even a day or two longer, this wouldn't have made the list. For all the mixed successes that came about with profession changes in Legion, cooking was not one of them. Nomi has origins back in Mists of Pandaria as a student who we teach how to cook. One could make the argument that it's we players who bore this hellspawn, but it's suspicious that Nomi started out like this and turned out to be this in a few short years. I complained about this in earlier videos. I was and I am disappointed in the delivery of Legion's cooking system. I thought that discovering recipes through questing wasn't a bad idea, and I'm not even upset about the literal time it could possibly take to learn max level recipes through chance. But this table and this NPC take nearly all control away from the player. This chance is a gamble that turns resources into dust. There's pretty much no reason why this system couldn't be similar to alchemy. I'd rather see a lower chance to learn a recipe after cooking with a certain material, but at least we're still able to make usable food. Giving Nomi our materials so he can cook so we can learn a brand new recipe makes no sense. Unlike herbs, cooking materials are pretty plentiful, but it's no excuse to have a system designed to destroy them. Nomi sucks. While we're at it, so does bacon. The announcement of the use of bacon was met with some fanfare, but its implementation is questionable at best, and at worst, worthless. Bacon adds additional time to well-fed buffs, which is nice, but it doesn't persist through death. So if maximizing the use of bacon means to use it in scenarios where death is unlikely, why use it at all? If the system were possible to quickly engineer, I'd like to see bacon add charges to the well-fed buff that count down when you die, or after it's supposed to expire. It gives value to raiders to save on some resources and for keystone runners who would lose time having to get a food buff after death. With little doubt, Mists of Pandaria handle reputations the best of any expansion. Mist built on the different reputation levels and unlocked levels of possible daily quests to complete. At Exalted, a final questline appeared to sort of top off the faction experience. Legion doesn't have dailies, but I expected a more diverse layer of world quests to be available for players trucking along the different reputations. As of now, I'm exalted with all reputations, and for a grind, it wasn't a bad time. There was a bit of diversity here and there, but when comparing it to the Nightfallen experience, the other faction's delivery fell flat. Having tabards as the primary reward at Exalted was unrewarding as well. In an expansion where cosmetics and toys are peppered throughout the leveling experience, working towards a tabard wasn't a worthwhile experience at all. Having missions directly tied to reputation is sort of an insult too. It's not worth doing these missions for tokens, even bind on account tokens, for reputation rewards that provide so little utility. It also doesn't help that in today's World of Warcraft these cosmetic rewards are account bound too. Reach and Revered was more rewarding, and I think it would have been even better if the Revered and Exalted reputations were switched around. Even better would be if more time were taken to conclude each faction's story through reputation, apart from whatever might be coming in later content. Ian Hazzikostas has admitted this as one of his great regrets. Scenarios where secondary stats are more valuable than primary stats exist within many specs, and will persist until we get deeper into Legion. Overall, it's been the source of a lot of confusion and frustration among players who are generally accustomed to judging gear value based on item level, followed by one or two of their most desired secondary stats. Gearing at the early stages of this expansion relies on, more than anything else, avoiding our least desired stats at all costs, even when considering item level upgrades. It's been widely suggested to reintroduce reforging, either as a band-aid or a permanent fixture into the game, but I think this is not the ideal solution. One is that this problem will fix itself after our gear gets to a certain item level threshold, where having a mix and match of stats won't feel like the end of the world. Especially as we approach the Nighthold raid and are set to obtain tier pieces, it'll be less of an issue. So why re-engineer a system that may no longer exist within the game data to dull a temporary issue? More importantly though, bringing back reforging means the prominence of secondary stats, that is the problem with it, will stay. The upper levels of min-maxing will doubtlessly have situations where two people will want the same piece of gear. One will want the gear as is, while the other will argue its merits based on being reforged. This is more theoretical, but class and spec balance may need to take another pass to factor in secondary stat levels that would be considered abnormal. Regardless of the argument though, trying to fix this through reforging is an inane waste of time, and it completes the rock and a hard place situation that Blizzard is currently in. That's it for today, and as always feel free to disagree, but this time I may bare some teeth and defend my position for a change. Things can always be better, but these few things I mentioned should be better. I'll see you guys Wednesday. Stay breezy, guys.